Good morning and happy Monday, everyone. I'm John Sears, the Lean Coordinator for the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. And today we are going to be talking about leader standard work and change management. So these two things interact in a very interesting and self-reinforcing way that I really want to bring to the forefront of our conversation when it comes to doing these things, because they are both deeply intertwined with lean and continuous improvement. And even aside from lean and continuous improvement principles, there are numerous ways that this stuff touches any and all of us as we do our daily work. But before we get into the topic itself, I want to introduce everyone to a really cool tool that I enjoy, and I think it's a really valuable tool before embarking on any unique project. And it's called TikTok, not to be confused with the social media platform. TikTok is a very unique tool for looking at things in a different way. So, for example, uh, this series of shapes up at the top here looks like nothing. It looks like maybe there's some arrows and some goofy little black shapes that don't really make a lot of sense. But does anyone see anything when they look at this shape? They take it as a whole?
I think it might be a house.
So if you shift your perspective and you look at the white space instead of the black space, you'll see that it's actually two words, fly and win. And once you see it, you can't really unsee it. And it's looking at things from that different perspective that I hope to bring to this topic of change management and leader standard work, because we all understand intellectually what leader standard work looks like, what change management looks like. So before we tackle that, I want to ask a question of what stands in the way of continuous improvement? And with the TikTok tool, we start with our fears, our negative factors. So when I ask you what stands in the way of continuous improvement, who wants to volunteer an idea or two?
Do you want it in the chat, or do you just want?
If you want to do it live, that'd be great, Maria, if you're already unmuted.
So I guess the fear of not being right, not having people be on board with your idea.
And say a fear of loss, either loss of control or some sort of a loss, some perceived issue.
All right. All right, and Caitlin added one more, which is added short-term workload. Okay. So with the TikTok tool, we start with the things that we all, the fears and challenges and hurdles that we face, because it's helpful sometimes to recognize that these things are not easy, that they can be complicated. Where the tool really shines is the talk factor. So while we outlined the challenges and the things that we're worried about, the talk is where we substitute an objective, a positive thought for each negative one. So offer affirmations or positive factors for each one of the negative factors. All right. So what's a positive thing about not being right, or what's a positive spin we can put on not being right? I see Helen showing up. Helen's great at coming up with those positive twists on things. What's a positive way to view not being right?
All
Or
ideas are good ideas. All ideas are good ideas.
yeah. So we might stumble on a great idea by trying things, right? So people aren't on board. What's a positive spin we can put on that, or something that we're going to do to take that into effect, or some sort of countermeasure that we can think about?
It's good to have a lot of people's perspectives,
Yeah.
like a devil's advocate kind of person.
All right, what's something we can use to counter that loss of control we might feel? One that I really like is that in losing that sense of control we might have as a leader, we could be helping somebody else to grow. So, we temporarily feel that loss of control, but handing that sense of ownership and selflessness over to other people can help them grow and develop and learn. All right, we got one more. So, I think the counterbalance for the short-term workload is the long-term workload, right? That's the typical trade-off for lean. Does anyone have a different perspective on that? Substitute or a challenge to the short-term workload?
Maybe you can be moved towards higher level work
Hmm.
if you can lean out wasteful things in your day-to-day job.
That's great, Chris. Thanks. So, all of these things, all of these challenges that we've outlined here are all elements of change management and continuous improvement. And it's not surprising to see them here because those are the hurdles that we still confront today in continuous improvement. And they're some of the biggest hurdles that we confront. So thank you, everyone, for those ideas. All right. So let's talk a little bit about why change management is necessary and how we grow as an organization. So we all have a set of standard processes. Ideally, they're mapped and documented, and we're all struggling to achieve that. But in order to grow and evolve, those standard processes have to evolve. And we can get there by setting targets and doing strategic planning, topics that we'll be addressing later in this leadership series. But they evolve primarily in two directions. So there's the strategic deployment, so a concerted effort to grow in a certain area. You can sort of see here along the time axis, and this metric here can be whatever your targets are, whatever's most important to your organization or to your group, and you want to be reaching towards some goal. And we can do strategic deployments and we can do continuous improvement. So constant improvement, growing towards our goal. But change is hard. It doesn't happen overnight. And a lot of times we have these steps that we take where part of the thing that we forget about continuous improvement sometimes is that it's continuous. So you improve a process, you get a little bit closer to your goal, and then you have another improvement that you want to make or another strategic choice or direction that you want to take to get you closer to your goal. And we iterate, we do a plan, do, check, act cycles. We iterate towards our final destination. And for each one of these cycles, we go through a series of steps. Now, traditionally, those 5 steps, and we can represent them through PDSA, we can represent them a lot of different ways, but fundamentally, we in change management as a broader idea rather than just focusing on a particular um, mode or method of thinking about change. But change management in general, we prepare, we craft a vision, we implement, we embed, and we review. So those first two are lean. And it's really easy when you've got the proper support to take a look at a process, map it out, work with me or another green belt to come up with an idealized future state. And sometimes you can have a future state that it's great and you're really excited about it. But if you fail to implement, if you implement it, but you don't maintain that change and things fall back to the status quo, if you fail to review and see if you're making progress in the direction you want to go to, it doesn't matter how well you've prepared, it doesn't matter how much data you collected, it doesn't matter how much work you put into crafting that vision, who you brought in, the resources you've identified and leveraged. it can all fall apart, and it can have nothing to do with lean, but we can look back and say, well, lean let us down, or our ideas weren't good enough. But the reality is they could have been, and they might have been. But there's this change management element, which exists in 3, 4, and 5, that's really important to get right if we want to be successful. So I want to present a model to you that some of you may be familiar with, some of you this may be new. It's Dr. Cotter's 8-step process for leading change. So again, we're looking at things from a change management perspective rather than any particular model. And I'm going to outline what those 8 elements are, and then we can talk through some of the ways that if we don't do each of these pieces, things can go wrong. So it starts with a sense of urgency. So building a sense that things need to change, that the status quo is not sustainable, that we have to move forward. Building a guiding coalition, figuring out who needs to be in that team, what do they need, what do you need in order to be successful, to come up with a successful form. Then once you've got that team, you generate your strategic vision and initiatives. So get the data, figure out what the data needs to be, where your metrics need to be, what you need to achieve in order to identify success. Enlist volunteer army. Who's going to sit there in those meetings and figure that work out? Who do you want mapping? Who do you want figuring out that future state? As a leader, we enable. We remove barriers, we provide resources, we make that vision possible. When we're talking about short-term wins, we are phasing the work. So maybe we start with the easy things and work on to the hard things. We come up with a game plan for how we want to roll that out. And we have to sustain it. So we have to build it into our process so that we are doing it on a regular basis, because change isn't just about us all agreeing we're going to change. It's about committing to it and making it a part of our day-to-day work. And that's something that I've seen happen time and time again, where we all agree in a meeting that, like, this is how we're going to do things from now on, but we just don't. Or we do it for a week and then it fades into the background because you're in a rut. If here in Vermont we've got a lot of dirt roads, right? And it's tricky sometimes to ride the top of those ridges on those dirt roads. It's easy to fall back into those ruts, and then you're stuck, and you got to put a lot more effort in to try and get out. And you have to institute that change. You have to make it a living reality. Now, things can go wrong with several of these elements. With the sense of urgency, a lot of people will ask, why this? Why now? And it's important for a leader to be able to say, well, let's take a look at the risks of inaction. What does that look like versus what are the risks of implementing a new process? Get people on board and recognizing that there's a challenge that has to be confronted. I'm treating this as an opportunity to grow and evolve and empower people. Change management is a great opportunity to allow people a chance to show off their skills. And I've seen a lot of greenbelts show great leadership, even when not in leadership roles, because they're passionate about improvement. These change projects can sometimes take on a life of their own, and it provides opportunities to grow people. Ultimately, you want any project that you tackle to be a part of your strategic vision. So you want to tie it into your program work. Using the A3 is a great chance to identify what are your metrics and how it ties into your overarching goals. Selecting the people that do the work. Step 5 is a real challenge and can tap into that loss of control that you guys cited as a challenge. Treat it as an opportunity to say yes and. What if I said yes to this? How can I support you to make this work a reality? And you can develop a phase work for implementation, but ultimately where these things can really fall down is to stay on top of the implementation and to ingrain the change. And that gets at the very root of human nature, in understanding that as human beings, we resist change. We want to keep doing things the same way, even for people like me that embrace change, that are change management oriented, that understand lean. Like, it's so tempting to keep doing things the same way, even if you agree that there's a better way to do things. And that's a part of human nature and something that we have to confront. And the chief way we can confront that is with leader standard work, because this is where leadership has to come in. This is where leadership has to be practiced. This is where execution becomes the most valuable thing you can do for your change management initiative. So let's talk a little bit about what standard work is and how we can work it into our change management efforts. So leader standard work is something that you can develop with your supervisor or with a coach. It is unique to every individual and every situation. There's no such thing as, ironically, standard work. You can't just pull it down from the internet. There are a million templates for standard work, but the actual work that you do on a regular basis has to be something that is created from the ground up. So what is this thing? It is a document that categorizes the work that is done on a certain schedule. And these are a couple of principal goals, and then I'll show you a template of what it can look like. So the goals of daily management are manifold. So ensure we're on track or off track towards meeting our goals. That includes regular check-ins, that includes measurement and tracking key performance indicators. It is regular rote practice. And that's something that shows up a lot in lean and continuous improvement is it's about practice and repetition and cycles. And that's because that is the only way to go from one state of being to another state of being is through practice, through repetition, and creating new ruts that hopefully take us on a different trajectory. Instead of off the road, it's up the hill. Can you tell I take my kids back and forth a dirt road to daycare every day? It provides a structure to expose problems and take corrective action. A lot of times as leaders, we find ourselves in situations of constantly putting out fires. Ideally, if daily management is practiced, if leader standard work becomes a part of the way we think and do business, we see things before they become fires. We see the smoke. We see the embers. We get it when it's small. And just like if you're treating cancer, you want to catch it early because it allows you better chance and more options in terms of treatment. And leader standard work is all about finding those opportunities and seeing these things before they develop into serious problems. And what's also unique about it is that it provides multiple different cycle scales. So there are medium and longer term checks to focus on countermeasures, process standards, and improvements. A key part of standard work is standardizing the practice of implementation. So all those change management ideas and principles and future state that we want to see, it works those things into it to make sure they happen and that they become a practice, not just for the leaders, but for staff as well. And what's also great about daily management is that it is a publicly available thing. It's not a private thing that I have on my that I have it as a checklist on my page. It is open to everyone so that everyone can see what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and how we're working forward to achieve those goals. It creates a common sense of effort that we're all rowing together and what we're working towards. And that type of communication, that type of manager to staff connection can be really important and really valuable. Caitlin, you can use elements of this in Microsoft Planner, but I'm actually going to show you a template for leader standard work here in a second. So here is an example of leader standard work. This is pulled out of Excel. If you Google leader standard work, you'll get lots of different kinds of templates. I just want to talk about some of the key elements that most of these leader standard work templates have and how they factor into the change management and practices that we've talked about. So number one is about accountability. So who's your core team? Who's accountable for doing these things? You can have multiple standard works if you oversee a bunch of different types of processes. And it's about accountability towards a process and towards the work of the program or the people that you oversee, and making this available so that people can see this is what's important to us. This is what's important to me as a leader. This is what we're working towards. And there are two main sections here. There's the daily steps. So this is where daily implementation or management efforts track off. So you can list here, what are the things I have to do on a daily basis? What are the things I do every day or want to do every day? Um, and or a day of the week that we do them. What do I have to do to make sure that the thing that we're implementing becomes a reality, or that the business that we perform is done successfully? What do I have to do on a daily basis? Then over in this section, it is weekly and monthly. So what are the things that I have to do every week? Do I want to check in on my implementation every week to make sure we're making progress on it? Because if I wait a month, I may not have accurate information, or we might fall behind on our implementation goals. And this is how we embed the work that is most important to us. It allows us to track what we do daily, weekly, monthly, and make sure we do them on a rote practiced behavior. I encourage you to Google leader standard work just to take a look at some of the templates that are out there and ways that you can track and utilize this. Now, maybe you want to start by using it just for a continuous improvement or change management project, just to see how it works, to see if you can practice. And again, it's really important to share this too with staff or the folks that you're working on change management with, because it's about reinforcing and developing new paths. So let's have a little conversation. I want you to think about how you spend your day. And I also want you to think of how you would want to spend it. Let's quickly brainstorm some activities we might put on that daily list or that weekly list or that monthly list. Real quick, any volunteers? What are some things that we might do daily that would be a part of leader standard work that can help us with either our the core business or a change management idea? Does anyone want to volunteer an idea for a daily task? All right. I'm not hearing anything. All right. So this will be homework for you all. Think about what you want to do daily, weekly, and monthly in order to sustain change or improvements. Because unless we practice it, unless we make ourselves accountable to the things that we want to do, unless we make ourselves accountable to staff and to our leaders, these things tend not to happen. So I want to encourage everyone to come up with that list and Google some leader standard work templates and see if you can find something that challenges you, that pushes you to practice and make this a reality. Because ultimately, any continuous improvement effort, any strategic deployment, it's all going to come down to execution and whether or not we are practicing it and embedding it in the culture to get that change. So before we wrap up, I just want to present one idea that's really, really interesting to me, and this seemed like the best place to talk about it. And that's who's in the room when we're getting things done. And there's one model that we tend to practice in state government, and there's another model I want to propose to you. So I think we've all been on a number of projects, and almost universally, the model that we use is this one right here, where we have a leadership committee that is overseeing the grand project. And when it comes time for the actual work to get done, we break into subcommittees. So you've got your central committee of leaders, and then you've got your subcommittee that's actually doing the work, that's implementing the change, that's rolling things out. And there are a couple of weaknesses of that model. The first is the people in the leadership committee tend to have the least free time to think about this project, to work on this project. And the people working in these subgroups are often not communicating effectively with one another. They're often reporting directly up to the leadership committee. So only the leadership committee has any full understanding of what's going on with the overarching project. And they are also the people that are thinking about this the least, because they've got a million other things going on. This is just a part of what they're doing. And a lot of times these subgroups might have overlaps or interactions that might be valuable. I have, it's not unusual for then these subgroups to break into further subgroups. And I watch a lot of these things fall apart because there's no one at, at subgroup of subgroup of subgroup that understands the grand design or how everything works together. And they put in their work, they put a thing together. Do the three things these subgroups have done interact? Do they work well together? Do they mesh? It ultimately ends up being leadership to say, like, well, this one and this one don't really work together, so we're just going to do part of one of these things. And a lot of times it leads to an incomplete solution. So I want to propose a different model, and this is not something you have to run with. I just wanted to propose it as something to think about. And it's this bullseye model, where it represents a core team of 2 to 4 people that may not be leaders. They may not be typical leaders. They may not be directors. They may not. They might be interested staff or a middle-level manager that has a lot of passion, or they're the problem owner that is working to really try and tackle this stuff. The important element of the core team is that they are in all of it. They spend the most time on the project. They work the hardest on the project. They are in all of the work all of the time. They dedicate the most time to this project. It provides an opportunity for folks that do not typically have leadership abilities to develop those leadership abilities, to focus on specific problems, that are aware of the entire problem because they are a part of every effort that the entire group undertakes. Your extended team is maybe 5 to 7, maybe as many as 10. So they are the work group that you bring in to represent um, broad areas of expertise and to represent new ideas. And oftentimes when you are doing the real core thinking about the project, that's when the extended team comes in. They're not in all the planning meetings, but they show up to the actual meeting itself and represent that expertise or represent a group of people and develop the work that happens. And then you have a even broader group of participants. These are people that maybe you survey or you solicit feedback from. They are specialists, so maybe you want to know what a certain piece of what they think. The next time you've got a change management project, I just want you to consider this bullseye model as an alternative for this this previous structure that really led to some unique challenges that I think we can get around using a different model. So just something to think about. And I want to thank you all for your time. We're at time right now. I've got time for maybe one question if someone has one. Any questions?
John, I really like this bullseye model, and I'm wondering how you think it helps communication across those different groups. Because sometimes I'm on those teams you've mentioned in terms of the different levels that we use right now, the models that we use right now. I don't really know what's going on in the different groups and feel very disconnected. So just want to learn how this one helps us with that.
Sure. So what's great about the core team is they are involved in everything. So it's 2 to 4 people that are involved in everything, and they've got more free time because they're not necessarily the people that are typically at the tops of these projects. So it also allows them, because they're 2 to 4 people, they can be focused on communication. And because everything spiders out from the center, this extended team can communicate directly out to the participants because the participants only need to provide fractional information. Like, this is a thing that we put together. What do you think? Or we've set up a meeting to do a mind mapping exercise. We could use your expertise. And it allows people to be involved to the level of their expertise, to be a factor in the process, but it also allows people that are, it's like pulses coming out from the middle over the course of a project versus three things done simultaneously. And because you've got a core team that's focused on working on these things, you can actually move through the elements faster. So whereas, with this model, you might do three subsets of a project, you have three sort of pulses from this core team to these participants, but the core team has been involved throughout all of them. So you have more people, and the extended team likely too, have been involved in every piece of it. So because you're not just involved in one small part of it, you're not picking and choosing and saying, I think I would be the most valuable here. You're saying, I am useful in all of these aspects. So, use me now and come back to me a month from now and I'll help you tackle the next thing too. So it's instead of, if I want to be involved in all three of these things, I have three simultaneous commitments that I have to be a part of. And, that person is unique, or I can't do that, so I'm only going to be a part of two of these. And the third one, although it might be interesting to me, I can't work on it because I've got two other things that I'm working on. This model steps through time, and so you get to be a piece of everything. And I think it really represents a great opportunity, and I'd like to see it practiced more.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, so we're at time now. As always, if you guys have any questions, you can email me or send me a Teams chat. It's been a pleasure, and if you've got any questions, let me know. So have a great day, everyone. Thanks for attending, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, John.
Maybe a month because of the holiday, but I'll see you later. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John. This
Take
was
care.
helpful.
Bye.